Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. Gaza's civil defence says IDF forces have killed 18 people, including 10 waiting for aid. This comes as Israel's military acknowledged a UN statement that at least 798 people have been killed while seeking food at aid sites in Gaza. Kyiv says that another Russian drone bombardment has targeted Ukraine, with injuries reported in the country. 3 have been reported dead in Russia after Ukrainian strikes, and this comes after previous overnight assaults from either nation. The capital, of course, has looked towards US aid, citing potential NATO support on missile defence systems. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Kuala Lumpur at the ASEAN Summit. The US Secretary of State also confirmed that China has invited President Donald Trump for a state visit. Meanwhile, foreign ministers from ASEAN nations continue to discuss global tensions, including tariffs. Trump's August 1st deadline for reciprocal rates has led to concern over economic instability. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has ruled out a normalization of relations with Israel. Israeli bombardments in the country have been limited since the ceasefire came into effect in November 2024 between Israel and Hezbollah. Turkish President Erdogan has hailed the PKK disarmament as an irreversible turning point. Over 40,000 people have been killed in fighting between the PKK and Turkish personnel in over 40 years of conflict. Pro-Palestinian activist student Mahmoud Khalil is seeking $20 million in damages, filing a wrongful detention claim against the Trump administration. Khalil was apprehended by Immigration and Customs Enforcement for more than 3 months. And US singer Chris Brown has pleaded not guilty to 2 further assault charges, this relating to an alleged bottle attack that took place at a London nightclub 2 years ago. The 36-year-old is accused of causing actual bodily harm in what prosecutors have called an unprovoked attack. We start this hour in the Middle East, and Israeli forces have reportedly killed 18 people in Gaza on Friday, including 10 civilians waiting for aid in the south of the country, this amid escalating violence. The UN reported that nearly 800 deaths have occurred since Israel eased its blockade in May, with most occurring near US and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites. The violence has been particularly severe near these facilities. 615 of the reported deaths are in those areas. Gaza's civil defence reported that the 10 fatalities on Friday occurred in the Al-Shakush area near Rafah, where Israeli forces have reportedly targeted aid seekers. Additionally, 6 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Khan Yunis, and 2 others died in drone strikes near Gaza City. Israel's military has responded by stating they are working to minimise civilian casualties and have issued new guidelines for soldiers after recent incidents. However, the UN and major aid organisations have raised concerns about the GHF's operations, accusing it of undermining humanitarian principles and potentially serving Israeli military objectives. The ongoing conflict has displaced nearly all of Gaza's 2 million residents, exacerbating the potential humanitarian crisis. Civil defence also reported deaths in a school sheltering displaced Palestinians in Jabalia al-Nazla, which has become a target of airstrikes recently. As violence continues, call for international action to protect civilians and ensure impartial aid distribution continue to grow. Well, joining us to discuss this latest development, Mohammed Mizan Aslam, a professor of international strategic studies, is joining us from Malaysia. Thank you ever so much, Professor, for being here. Further strikes reported on Friday. Of course, this a situation that has been brought up by the UN with nearly 800 deaths reported at Gaza aid sites, many of them Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid sites. How significant is this level of reported death at aid sites at a time where there are reports of famine and other humanitarian crises within the Gaza enclave?
Thank you very much for having me. All right. So my response to what is happening right now in Gaza, actually, it is a real catastrophic and a failure of United Nations. So we have seen from the day one of this conflict until now, a series of condemnation have been out, from time to time, but have no serious action taken. It is a real failure of United Nations, because United Nations have been established since 1947, supposed to avoid such conflicts, such humanitarian crisis and genocidal that is happening right now in Gaza and all over the world. But what is happening right now is clearly they have no serious action taken, and numbers of people have been dying is like a pile up from time to time. And for Israel particularly, they've been asked, there was some like a proposal have been sent to United Nations particularly of handling distribution of aid. And it is not been accepted by United Nations. However, Israel have the total control of Gaza situation, and all of the foods have been distributed through their facilities and through their approval, and not even killing Gaza at their home and at their places. Now they're killing them as well as in the temporary tent. And the worst part is the killing now is happening at the distribution area. So finally, for me, all of the Gaza will be demolished and they will be wiped out from the area of Gaza Strip. Yeah.
Yes, Professor, of course, this report comes amidst heightened efforts over a potential ceasefire. Mediators, including Egypt, Qatar and the United States, trying to work to find a proposal and a plan that can be agreed by both Israel and Hamas. Given the current humanitarian situation in Gaza, how pivotal is it that that comes as soon as possible?
It is not a possible thing, because the situation in Gaza actually is a very worsening, and we be talking about the ceasefire. I think from maybe last 2 years since the war have been erupted until now, but they have no such thing. And I seriously condemning the attack of 7 October. And I also urge the Hamas to release all of the hostages. And at the same time, Israel have to stop killing the, which is the civilians, killing the people, children and women and many more. So whether it is a proposal of ceasefire or not, but for me, it's just a buying of time. But the killing still go on. Even when Israel starts the war with Iran, at the same time, they continue killing civilians in Gaza. And also at the same time, we can see Israel also attack Lebanon, also attack Egypt and Syria, and also Yemen. So at the same time, they have war between many countries with Israel. And this shouldn't be happen. And it should be on the table of negotiation. And it is not only Israel, but all of the Arab countries should come to work together, find a solution, and put aside their arrogance and whatever their own interests. And they have to think about their people. So we can see what is happening right now is certain people, certain leaders who have interest and to retain a power for themselves, and they're willing to kill civilians who have no knowledge about what is happening.
Yes, Professor, I want to look at a potential deal. Of course, a US proposal from Steve Witkoff for around 60 days of ceasefire would see Also, hostages released, a limited hostage release in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. This was accepted by Israel. Is what's happening now the responsibility of Hamas, and is it on Hamas to finally agree to a ceasefire deal and put the people, the Palestinian people in Gaza first?
Yeah, I think we have a few numbers of ceasefire before. And even though the ceasefire have been inked, but the killing still happen. And I think for Hamas as well, they have to realize actually as long as they keep the hostages, and Israel will keep killing them. So I think the Hamas should agree on the ceasefire and just release all of the hostages, and Israel at the same time have to submit to the condition of the ceasefire. And I think if you go again towards all of the ceasefire that have been agreed by Israel and many countries, but they have no a real submission. At the same time, the killing still happen, the attacks still happen, the missiles have been sent towards the country still happening. So I think it is need a real submission, and shouldn't be any like a chicken out from the ceasefire that they agree with. And the numbers of arrests so many, and I think we need also to urge the independent observer, which is handled by United Nations, to come in to observe the whole process and to stop from happening again. Yeah.
Yes, if you stay with us, Professor, we're now going to stay on the topic but look at a response. The Israeli military has acknowledged that Palestinian civilians had been harmed at aid distribution centres in the Gaza Strip, this following deadly incidents that have raised global concerns. More than 400 Palestinians have died while attempting to access humanitarian aid since Israel lifted its 11-week blockade on Gaza in May. The violence followed reports that Israeli artillery shelling meant to prevent civilians from approaching certain areas near aid centres had been inaccurate, resulting in at least 30 to 40 casualties, including fatalities. In response, the Israeli military stated that it is reviewing the circumstances surrounding these deaths and has already taken steps to enhance safety around distribution points. The acknowledgement comes amid mounting criticism from the United Nations, which has condemned the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation for its role in aid distribution. The UN has described the operation as inherently unsafe, with Secretary General Antonio Guterres warning that it was killing people by channeling desperate civilians into militarised zones. However, Israel and the US continue to back the GHF, claiming that it operates independently of Hamas. With over 57,000 Palestinians so far killed in the ongoing conflict, the international community is urging stronger protections for civilians and impartial aid distribution in Gaza. The situation remains tense, with both Israel and the UN under pressure to ensure safer humanitarian efforts. I just want to clarify that that death toll figure is from Gazan authorities. That is a disputed figure, with some groups saying that the number may actually be higher. Once again, Professor Mohammed Mizan Aslam joining us to discuss this response from Israel and from the IDF. We've just detailed there some of the points from that response, Professor. Does that go far enough?
You mean the situation in Gaza right now?
I mean the response from the IDF saying that they are going to look into the circumstances and that they're trying to limit civilian casualties. Is that statement, in your opinion, going far enough to address the civilian deaths within the Gaza enclave?
I totally disagree with this statement, because if IDF and the Israel government is really sincere in avoiding killing of civilians, they should hand over the distributions work to United Nations, because we do have UNRWA before, and we do have also many organizations that are willing to distribute the aids. So let them do it. So not by controlling by the IDF, because we know that when the military that have a conflict with the Gaza right now handle the situation, definitely they will handle in their way because they will always see another party as an enemy. So I think they have to let the distribution handled by the third party or independent party, which is observed by United Nations, and avoid the area to means like to reduce or to totally avoid the killing of civilians. So as long as the military still handle the distribution of aids, I think the killing still happen. And also until now, where is the independence journalists that should be on the ground to see and to report the real situation? And we know that the recent report and chaos in the BBC reports about Gaza situation also have been leaked out. And actually, there are many like a questionable situation in Gaza right now, which is we need an urgent interfere by another party to see and to report the real situation. So as far as I know, as long as the situation right now still handled by one party who are involved in the war itself, so it won't be an equal situation. So we have to understand when the conflict between two parties happen, so the another like a third party or the another independent party should be in the middle, like become the facilitator or intermediator to make sure both sides agree on certain things, or both sides not like starts the attack and whatsoever. But as long as the situation right now handled by one party who are involved in the war itself, so it won't work. It won't work. That's my word.
Yes, and let's look at that aid situation. What are the other options? We're hearing from the UN that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is unsafe. They're saying that the US-backed group that has also got Israeli support is not the best way of providing aid. What are the other options, Professor?
Yeah, actually, for now, I think there are also many people who are willing to involve in so-called redevelopment of Gaza. And we know that the Gaza situation right now is very unstable, and it's not a safe place to live. So then, many people who show their interest to involve in development of so-called like a new Gaza, which is more like a more systematic and well-designed, those kind of things. Okay, so I think we should allow this group of interest person or interest countries such as Qatar that show the interest before, UAE, as well as ASEAN countries and United States of America as well. And I think even China also shown their interest to involve in redevelopment of Gaza. And I think we should allow this group of countries or this group of people to come and to help an issue of humanitarian aids, at the same time to make sure the condition of the people much better than what they are enduring, yeah, for such a long time, and also to avoid like a new attack and new conflict from happening. Yeah.
Yes. Professor Mohammed Mizan Aslam, thank you ever so much for joining us. We will, of course, continue to bring you all the developments from Gaza as the offensive from Israel continues. But we move on now to look at another conflict, that's the Russia-Ukraine war. And Keith Kellogg, US President Donald Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, has announced plans to visit the country. He has stated that he will arrive in Kyiv on the 14th of July, and the visit will last a week. Kellogg previously visited Kyiv in February, a month after the inauguration of US President Donald Trump. The announcement comes amid speculations that Trump plans to use presidential authority to greenlight a new military aid package for Ukraine. This would mark the first time that Trump has taken this step since taking office, as the Trump administration so far only permitted the continued flow of arms approved by former President Joe Biden. Only a week earlier, Kyiv and its European partners were alarmed by an unexpected decision by the Pentagon to pause some Ukraine-bound weapons shipments, including Patriot air defence missiles and precision munitions, pending a stockpile review. The halt came at a critical moment as Russia has identified aerial strikes across Ukraine, launching a record 741 drones and missiles on July the 9th. Trump said he was unaware of who initiated the pause and has since ordered to resume at least some of the shipments, pledging to provide Ukraine with additional defensive weapons. Well, joining us to discuss this latest development and the wider ramifications of US support in Ukraine amid continued military action on the battlefields and in the air, Dr. Satoru Nagao, a foreign affairs expert, joining us from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Let's first look at this visit of Keith Kellogg, the envoy to Ukraine from the US. What's the significance of the timing of this visit that's going to last a full week? Does this signal a potential shift back to more support for Ukraine from the Trump administration?
Yes, this is very important timing. Since the end of May and June and now July, Russia has intensified the military action against Ukraine. So, for example, in June, Russia used 5,000 drones to attack Ukraine. This is a completely different level before May. So that's why the United States side need to decide to change their policy. Originally, the United States, the Trump administration tried to arrange a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. But now it is clear that the Putin side do not have the will to seek the ceasefire just now, because they believed the war is beneficial than peace. So that's why in this case, this is a turning point for the United States to change their policy from the seeking the ceasefire to the supporting Ukraine by providing the weapon and at the same time imposing the sanction against Russia. So that's why how long can the U.S. wait the Putin response, or how long the Ukraine can wait the support from the United States? These are kind of the things maybe U.S. and Ukraine need to arrange their policies themselves. That's why the U.S. envoy visited Ukraine just now, I think.
Yes, and Dr. Nagao, of course, we've spoken today and in previous days about intensifying Russian strikes. These Patriot missile defense systems, Zelensky says that 10 are needed to protect critical infrastructure within Ukraine. Talk of NATO supports as well. With Western allies looking towards supporting Ukraine, is this a signal that the war might not be anywhere near peace and that it in fact could be going on for much longer with much more intense strikes on the way?
Yes, this is very serious situation, I think. But at the same time, this is a war already it's spent 3 years, and both sides, both Russia side and Ukraine side, cannot move their front line so easily because of their defensive power. So that's why the supporting Ukraine or the intensified military operation of the Russian side cannot change the situation drastically anyway. So that's why this is serious situation, but not too serious to change the course. But at the same time, generally, most of the war spent 4 years. World War One spent 4 years. World War Two spent 4 years. Indeed, 4 years is one time. Many wars. Korean War also 4 years. And this is the fourth year, but not the finished 4 years. So in the Russia and Ukraine. So that's why still they have the power and they do not give up their way to seek the goal. So that's why maybe one more year they will fight, and maybe we will see another aspect. That is rough calculations of what will happen in the near future. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, very briefly before we move on, of course, US relations with Russia have been stronger than they were under the Biden administration, but a shift from Donald Trump. Do you think that that is something we will see moving forward? Of course, Marco Rubio met with Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, at the ASEAN summit. Could you see tensions raising between those countries and potential US sanctions, something that has been voiced by politicians within the US, and Trump himself has spoken about potentially green-lighting?
Yes, of course, direct negotiation between US and Russia could affect situation, but at the same time, view from the strategic situation, indeed, Russia do not have will to cease war just now. So, and in this case, foreign minister cannot move the situation. State secretary cannot persuade Russia itself, I think. So this is exchanging opinion, and the U.S. will tell Russia that there's a possibility the U.S. will impose more tougher sanctions against Russia. But at the same time, Russia do not have the reason to seek the ceasefire just now. So Russia tried to bind the time through the negotiation, not cease the war itself, I think.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, you will be staying with us. We, of course, will bring you all of the updates from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. But we move on now, and a top commander of the Kurdistan Workers' Party has called on Turkey to enact sweeping legal reforms to ensure that PKK members can return home safely and transition into political life. In an exclusive interview with AFP, PKK co-leader Bese Hozat said fighters are ready to lay down their arms and pursue democratic politics, but only if they are given legal protection. Hozat warned that without constitutional guarantees, returning rebels could face prison or even death. She also remanded the release of jailed PKK founder Abdullah Öcalan, calling his freedom a primary condition for the success of this peace process. Well, these comments come as the PKK has begun destroying its weapons in a symbolic disarmament process in northern Iraq, a move Turkey has welcomed as a milestone. But the future of peace now hinges on Turkey's response to these core demands. Well, thank you for staying with us, Dr. Satoru Nagao. Let's look at these comments that we've had, looking for guarantees from the Turkish government surrounding no arrest, and also looking into potential political moves. We discussed earlier in the day the significance of the PKK and Turkish government and the feud that has happened, but how likely and how realistic will it be for Turkey to turn around and say there won't be any sanctions and will welcome you into politics? Is that a realistic, accepting move?
I think this is realistic. There is a possibility this is realistic because for a long time he demands such kind of ceasefire between Turkey and Kurdish PKK. But PKK side hasn't accepted this demand from the former leader for a long time because the situation allows them to survive. But recently, the situation in Syria has changed. So their stronghold is located in Syria. But in case of Syria, the civil war has ended after the Arab Spring. So that's why so civil war has happened after Arab Spring. But now this is the timing to end the war. and the Syrian government need to decide the attitude, and Turkey side need to decide the attitude, and they are negotiating. Under such kind of situation, the Kurdistan stronghold, how to maintain is a matter of concern, and this is the timing to end the war, they start to believe. So that's why it has happened. So situation in Syria is pushing PKK to decide and accept former leaders' demand, I believe.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, thank you very much for that insight. We will, of course, be across all of the developments as the PKK disarm and a potential route back into politics. Professor Nagao will be staying with us as we move to Cambodia's parliament, which has approved a constitutional amendment allowing authorities to revoke the citizenship of anyone deemed to have colluded with foreign powers or betrayed the state. All 125 lawmakers, including Prime Minister Hun Manet, voted in favour of the change, which replaces a clause that previously protected Khmer citizens from being deprived of nationality. Justice Minister Coet Rit said a new law formalising the revocation process will soon follow. He dismissed certain concerns about targeting critics, but rights groups like Amnesty International say the move could be weaponised to punish dissent and exile opposition, violating international law. The amendment follows comments by former leader Hun Sen, who demanded legal action against exiled critics amid a border dispute with Thailand. Cambodia has a long record of jailing political opponents, including opposition leader Kem Sokha, who was sentenced to 27 years for treason last year. Well, Dr. Nagao, thank you for staying with us. Could you just detail the ramifications of this move?
This is one of the process to make sure Hun Sen's regime as a strong authoritarian regime. Because in the past, this process has already started, and now from the Hun Sen to Hun Sen's family leads this regime. But legally, still Cambodia try to be the democratic country on surface. So now they try to change the legal system itself. So after they change these legal systems, they will be more authoritarian, more clear authoritarian, not only the actual but also the legally. So that's why their process is strengthen the regime based on the Hun Sen's family. So this is not good for view from the democracy, but at the same time, the regime believe this is a good thing. So this is Cambodia's way, and other people, other countries do not think this is good.
Dr. Nagao, thank you for that update there. We are now going to move to North America, and Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil is suing the US government for $20 million, alleging wrongful detention and targeting over his pro-Palestinian activism. Khalil, a Palestinian refugee and US permanent resident, spent over 100 days in immigration custody after being arrested in March, accused of posing a threat to US foreign policy. The Trump administration sought his deportation, citing Secretary of State Marco Rubio's determination that his activism harmed national interests, but a federal judge ordered his release last month, ruling he posed no flight risk or community threat. In his legal claim, Khalil accuses the government of false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, and inflicting emotional distress. His lawyers argue he was targeted for protesting Israel's actions in Gaza, protests which the administration has linked to anti-Semitic behaviour, an accusation Khalil rejects. The 28-year-old says his arrest, which occurred in front of his pregnant wife, caused lasting trauma, including missing the birth of his first child. Now he's demanding either $20 million or an official apology for what he calls a chilling attack on student activism and free speech. The Department of Homeland Security dismissed Khalil's claim as absurd, defending the government's actions. Well, joining us to discuss this lawsuit and this claim, Terry Milewski, a former correspondent of CBC and author, joining us from Ottawa. Khalid spent around 3 months in detention, Terry. He is claiming the damages of that to the tune of $20 million. Do you think he's actually looking for $20 million? Or as he said, is he looking to make a statement here with an official apology also sufficing? How do you see it?
Well, I think he's clearly looking for either to be the apostle of free speech by accepting much, much less than $20 million, or he wants to pocket the $20 million. Either way, he wants to humiliate the government. He wants to humiliate the administration. I find it doubtful that the administration will bite on either option at the moment, and then they must consider the possibility that they might lose if it goes to court. And I wouldn't like to predict which way that goes. It's a complicated question, and it's bound. Almost anything that the administration does at this point will be potentially embarrassing. There could be a bad result because, as of now, there are still plenty of courts which will find against the government. It still happens. So I think that either way, he's got the government between a rock and a hard place, hasn't he?
Terry, do you think this brings to light a broader question around anti-Semitism? Of course, the Trump administration looking at universities in the States, Columbia being one of them, but also, of course, Harvard. A long-running debate now between anti-Semitism but also free speech. Do you think that line is being muddied, and do you think more clarity needs to be made about what clearly is anti-Semitism and what is free speech, and questioning what some people view as atrocities in Gaza on civilians?
Yes, I think that this certainly is a live question, and I think it will remain so, because I don't see this being settled. This is just a proxy for the real battle. Whether he can win his case and so forth, that's all a symptom rather than, it doesn't tell us that much about the cause. The long-running, eternal, perhaps, debate that you outline is not going to be settled this week or next year. It is going to remain true that Israel's opponents will find whatever pretext is current, what the flavor of the month. Right now, of course, it's the situation in Gaza, and the allegation, which you have seen front page news, New York Times today, for example, the investigation by the Times suggesting that Prime Minister Netanyahu has stayed in power, is using the war in Gaza to stay in power. The longer he prolongs the war, the theory is, the longer he stays in power. So if it's not that, it'll be the next thing. There'll be some next other horror story, which will keep this debate alive and unsettled. There will be no winner. Nobody's going to finally have an ultimate court case that is going to prove that free speech means this, anti-Semitism means that. This will remain with us for another century, I think, as it has been since 1947.
Yes, Terry, you will be staying with us. Thank you for the insights on that. We move on and head over back to Europe now. The European Union is set to scrutinise a controversial migration return deal between UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron. The agreement aims to curb the flow of migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats by returning 50 migrants a week to France in exchange for a similar number being legally resettled in the UK. While Britain insists the plan is legally sound, the European Commission wants to examine the substance and form of the arrangement. France is required to consult the EU under Brexit rules, and criticism has come from Mediterranean states like Italy, Spain and Greece, who say the deal violates EU migration policy. EU law experts say the Commission cannot block the deal directly, but could initiate legal action if necessary. The Commission stressed it will review the agreement to ensure it complies with both the spirit and letter of EU law. Well, Terry, thank you for staying with us. Of course, a conversation on migration in Europe is a key talking point. We've seen a rise in in right-wing parties looking at immigration. Of course, Brexit, a large part of the media around Brexit at the time was focusing on migration. It's an issue the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom looked to address and brought in a plan. This now a cooperation between France, who themselves, of course, have a rising popularity in right-wing politics and issues surrounding migration. What do you think the European Commission will look to be gaining from questioning this plan between two countries, one of them not even part of the EU?
Migration is rather like the last question you asked me. This is going to be with us for a very long time. I'm speaking to you from Canada, where the migration of more than 1 million people from the Indian diaspora has vastly influenced our politics, our lives. I've done probably half a dozen of these interviews today, all on one topic, which is Khalistani involvement in extortion schemes in Western Canada and in Brampton, Ontario, where gangs of men show up and say, nice restaurant you've got here, shame if something were to happen to it. So you have to pay protection money to me, I'll protect you from me. And so, you know, that's just one little detail of the global picture of migration, which has made the right-wing parties in Europe and elsewhere. It's given them momentum. We must stop this. We're under attack. There is an erosion of our values. And sometimes that looks very much like white values to critics of this point of view and those who are opposing the onward march of the right. I do notice a change, though. I think I'm not alone in noting a change, that it used to be that you were notorious and you were much criticized in the quality newspapers, for example, in the British example, where the famous case of Enoch Powell, once an important Tory minister in the government, and he had made a famous speech about how he sees the river Tiber flowing with blood. He was warning against immigration from third world countries, and this was taken to mean, you know, these were brown people. And he had said a very controversial thing, and he was ostracized by high society, and it was considered a disastrous speech. Now, fast forward to 50 years, and here we are where you can get elected and very close to the pinnacle of power in Italy, in France, and other places by saying more or less, maybe you choose more polite words, what Enoch Powell said all those decades ago. So there has been a change, I think, where Europe has become more tolerant and more than just tolerant of speech which used to be considered out of bounds. Now it's very much in bounds to say that migration is the death of Europe.
Terry Milewski, thank you for discussing that topic. We are going to move on now, heading over back to North America. The US State Department is firing over 1,300 employees as part of a sweeping reorganization plan launched by the Trump administration earlier this year. According to a senior State Department official, termination notices will be sent to 1,107 civil service employees and 246 foreign service officers currently serving in domestic roles. The affected foreign service officers will be immediately placed on administrative leave for 120 days, after which they will formally lose their jobs as per an internal notice. The staff reduction has been hailed by President Donald Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and their Republican allies as overdue and necessary to make the department leaner, nimbler and efficient. However, the move has been severely criticised by current and former diplomats who say it will weaken US influence and its ability to counter existing and emerging threats abroad. The Trump administration is reshaping American diplomacy and working aggressively to reduce the size of the federal government by mass dismissals and dismantling whole departments like the US Agency for International Development and the Education Department. Well, joining us to discuss this latest update is Scott Faulkner, head of the Eagle Enterprises, a security firm in Washington. Scott also joining us from Washington. Scott, is there some irony here? Donald Trump signs his big, beautiful bill, which is going to add potentially $3 trillion to the US debts, but then making these cuts, which some people are saying could have ramifications to security.
We're talking decades of waste, talking decades of layer upon layer upon layer of bureaucrats that really have no real value. We like going back to when I was with Reagan. The joke was you had hallway ambassadors who were basically people of very senior rank who just basically wandered the halls and attended meetings that had no agenda and no output. And so this is a long overdue honing down. The other part is that the State Department, especially with the 8 years of Obama, the 4 years of Biden and Trump, not really addressing the State Department much during his first term. You've got literally 16 years of left-wing ideological leanings and anti-American activities and even pro-Hamas bias within the State Department. So cleaning house is both a good management move, a good budgetary move, and ultimately a good strategic move.
Yes, Scott. Just very quickly, looking at that cutting, that trimming that you've spoken about there, is there a risk that this does have wider ramifications? We've seen cuts from Donald Trump being announced throughout his second term. Is there a risk that the cuts could go too far, even if, as you're saying, there is fat that needs to be trimmed?
Having worked in an embassy overseas in Africa during the Reagan years, I can tell you that the layers of people who do nothing but create plans that are never used, who develop intelligence analyses based on basically third and fourth party information, there's no real value, there's no real risk. What you want is a lean department focused on America first, and a lean department that is working closely with frontline original sources within our intelligence community and within host countries to really create an accurate picture of each country's needs, each country's risks, and America's opportunities.
Scott, you will be staying with us, of course, on NewsX. Well, we will continue to bring you all of the updates on those potential federal cuts in the United States. But US President Donald Trump is backing away from earlier calls to abolish FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, as devastating floods in Texas highlight the need for federal disaster aid. According to the Washington Post, the Trump administration now plans a rebranding of the agency, shifting more responsibility to state leaders rather than eliminating it entirely. The shift comes as Trump visits flood-hit Texas, where at least 120 people have died, with over 160 people still missing. When asked whether he still intends to phase out FEMA, Trump deflected, saying it's a topic we can talk about later. A White House official confirmed that Texas has already received emergency funds, with Governor Greg Abbott leading the response. Trump also signed a federal disaster declaration on Sunday to expedite aid, marking a notable reversal from his earlier stance on scaling back FEMA's role. Well, Scott, thank you for staying with us on this. Is this an acknowledgement from Trump that this FEMA department, the FEMA, is still needed, given the devastating flooding that we've seen in the past week or so?
I think so. The key is that state agencies, emergency response agencies, are clearly the best front line because they know the locations, they know the people, they have a great incentive to do the right thing for their people. FEMA, I think, more dispersing funds and possibly technology that isn't available within that individual location, whether it's tornadoes, whether it's these horrible floods, whether it's hurricanes, will probably happen later this hurricane season, that there's definitely a role for a centralized expertise, centralized technology, and certainly a centralized dispersing agent in terms of funds for disaster recovery. Key is the current organization of FEMA agile enough, focused enough, and efficient enough to do that? And I think that's a useful discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Scott Faulkner, thank you for joining us to discuss that topic. We will move on now. And US singer Chris Brown has pleaded not guilty to a charge of assault causing actual bodily harm by allegedly attacking a music producer with a bottle in a London nightclub 2 years ago. Brown last month denied a more serious charge of attempting to inflict grievous bodily harm in what prosecutors said was an unprovoked attack on Abraham Dior in a nightclub in 2023. The 36-year-old appeared at London's Southwark Crown Court, where he only spoke to confirm his name and enter his plea of not guilty to causing ABH and a further charge of possessing an offensive weapon in a public place. Brown was arrested at a hotel in Manchester, Northern England in May after returning to Britain for the first time since the incident 2 years ago. Moving on, the United Nations has reported that more than 3,000 people have died in Haiti due to escalating gang violence since the start of the year. According to the UN's Human Rights Office, at least 3,141 people were killed between January the 1st and June the 30th, 2025. While the violence has long been concentrated in the capital, Port-au-Prince, the gang's territorial control is rapidly expanding, with new reports showing that over 1,000 people have been killed in regions outside the capital since October of last year. It's facing violent gangs, human rights violations from security forces and abuses from so-called self-defense groups. In addition to the killings, hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes. With the situation worsening, the UN urged the international community to increase its support for Haiti and its authorities, who are responsible for protecting the population but are struggling to maintain order amidst the violence. As the death toll continues to rise, Haiti faces a deepening humanitarian crisis with no immediate solution in sight. We head to Africa now, and the United Nations says the crisis in Darfur has reached an intolerable state. Speaking at the Security Council, ICC prosecutor Nazat Shamim Khan warned of escalating war crimes and crimes against humanity. She said hospitals and aid convoys are being targeted, famine is rising and civilians are under siege. Rape, abductions and forced recruitment are now widespread. Khan stressed that atrocities in Sudan continue and warned conditions may still worsen. She confirmed there is strong evidence of ongoing war crimes. The ICC says justice is coming and that Ali Khoshaib trial will not be the last.
We come together at a time when it can seem difficult to find appropriate words to describe the depth of suffering in Darfur. The humanitarian position has reached an intolerable state. Hospitals, humanitarian convoys, and other civilian objects are apparently being targeted. Famine is escalating, and humanitarian aid is not reaching those in dire need of it.
Well, that's all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.